Before I welcome on our first wonderful, esteemed keynote presenter, I want to leave a little quote from Albert Hofmann after he had his great first psychedelic experience. The psychedelics gave me an inner joy, an open-mindedness, a gratefulness, open eyes, and an internal sensitivity for the miracles of creation. I think that in human evolution, it has never been as necessary to have the substance of LSD. It is just a tool to turn us into what we're always supposed to be. Now with that, I want to welcome onto the stage here in just a moment, Dr. Christopher Bache, who is a professor emeritus in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Youngstown State University, where he taught for 33 years. He's also an adjunct professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies, an emeritus fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and is on the advisory board of the Groff Legacy Training. Chris's work explores the philosophical implications of non-ordinary states of consciousness, especially psychedelic states. He's an award-winning teacher and international speaker. Chris has written 4 books: Life Cycles, A Study of Reincarnation in Light of Contemporary Consciousness Research; Dark Night, Early Dawn, a pioneering work in psychedelic philosophy and collective consciousness; The Living Classroom, an exploration of collective fields of consciousness and teaching; and of course, what many of you might be familiar with today, LSD and The Mind of the Universe, the story of his 20-year journey with LSD. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Christopher Bache.
What an honor to be here with you today, to celebrate Bicycle with you today, an opportunity for the psychedelic community to come together, to see each other, to reunite, make plans for the future. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You look at me and you think, he doesn't look like he's done a whole lot of LSD. I think the divine designed me as an undercover agent for the psychedelic revolution. It's amazing what you can get away with at a university classroom if you look like an accountant, you know? I tell my students sometimes if I look like on the outside, like I think on the inside, I would probably look like Jerry Garcia. So, 82 years since Bicycle Day. 82 years. We've come a long way. Think of how many people are doing psychedelics regularly 82 years after Albert Hofmann's first famous bicycle ride. And the reasons we use psychedelics, what draws us into psychedelics and how we use them, vary enormously. I mean, if we were to do an inventory of everyone in this room, we would find so many different approaches to psychedelics, so many different methodologies in using psychedelics, and so many different results coming out of that. And the psychedelic testimony of the community together is always more important than the psychedelic testimony of any one individual, because it's just so many medicines, so many ways in which it impacts human consciousness, so many ways in which we can use them to draw out the deeper reserves of human consciousness, that always the collective is more important than the work of an individual. But what I'd like to do to sort of help seed our awareness is sort of talk about my work some and talk about some of the potentials that lie, I think, untapped so far in the current psychedelic renaissance. The current psychedelic renaissance is focused primarily first on healing. That's how we're getting psychedelics back into the academic discussion, back into the intellectual discussion, back into the mainstream, is demonstrating psychedelics' capacity to heal the wounds of broken heart, to heal the wounds of life, even to heal the wounds of the soul if it goes deeper. And this is critically important. And I understand all the scientific brethren who are working hard to document and legitimate and to verify the healing that psychedelics can facilitate, and to refine our ability to integrate them into our into our clinical practice. Really, really very important. But for me, this is kind of just like the first stage, the first step into the deep waters that psychedelics make available. If you think of the ocean of consciousness, of consciousness as an ocean, to me, healing or maybe using psychedelics to augment creativity, another separate function, or to sort of generate insights, to go to psychedelic states in order to gather insights that one might use to apply to one's life or changing circumstances. When you have a choice, I mean, every time I have an important choice, I mean, a big important choice, I'm not going to address that only in my ordinary state of consciousness. I will go into psychedelic space to get that little larger expansion, a little more dilation, a little more communion, a little more intake, and bring my questions there, and then seek the guidance that I'm asking for, and I follow the advice I get there. I followed that advice in terms of what books I write next, where the people are, where to go with the research. Healing, creativity, enhancing creativity. I think of my friend Alex Gray and all the psychedelic artists in the movement. Insight. But these, to me, collectively are still only in the shallow waters of the ocean, near the shore, near where we live in the personal world. But then there is, what if we go deeper? What if we use our psychedelic protocols to go deeper into the ocean of consciousness, and we begin to get into the area of spiritual awakening? And I'm thinking, for example, of the dialogue between the Zen Buddhist, between the Buddhist community and the psychedelic community that was published years ago, Zigzag Zen, which is the question of, are psychedelics useful in the facilitation of genuine enlightenment, or are they a hindrance, as classical Buddhists would hold? Spiritual awakening is different than healing. It's different than creativity, because here we're using psychedelics to break into the deeper, universal themes of human existence. Enlightenment is not about personal healing. You may go through personal healing, of course, to move there, but enlightenment is really grappling with the fundamental human condition at its core. What is the core struggle that we are working with here? What are the core issues we're dealing with? What is the nature of my identity? Underneath all the social conditioning, all the psychological conditioning, underneath, we feel that there's something more authentic underneath. What is that deeper identity? Until eventually we come to some type of realization that the Hindus described as Atman, the essence of the individual, is Brahman, the essence of the totality, the essence of God. Atman is Brahman. Awakening to just immersing ourselves into seeing first and then entering into communion with the creative intelligence of the universe that permeates all things. Different than healing, right? Broad, deep, something which we share with all other human beings. Our personal problems we may not share with all human beings, but the deep spiritual questions, the deep seeking at that underneath level, we share with all human beings. To me, though, healing, creativity, insight, spiritual awakening, however you conceptualize that, however you imagine that, is still only into the sort of midwaters of the ocean of consciousness. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is what I call cosmological exploration, using psychedelics in a manner to probe the deep structure of reality at the deepest levels possible, to see, experience, understand what is the underlying structure of human existence. What are the layers of human existence? What is the source of creativity, the creativity that gave birth to our universe 13.7 billion years ago? My psychedelic journey began 45 years ago when I was a brand new academic, freshly minted out of graduate school, beginning my academic work, and I was pretty much an atheistically inclined agnostic at the time. That's what 7 years of graduate school in religious studies made me. And then I met Stan Grof's work. I met two people's work my first year. Ian Stevenson, whose work in reincarnation convinced me in one reading that reincarnation was a fact of life, just a simple empirical fact of life, deal with it. And as an academic, that wasn't part of my worldview at all in all of my training. But then secondly, more importantly, was Stan Grof. I read his book, Realms of the Human Unconscious, which turned my life. It was a major pivot point. And so I began the psychedelic, therapeutically oriented work that I knew would be required for me to have access to the kind of experiences that would allow me to hopefully make some kind of contribution to my discipline, which is philosophy of religion. So I started a psychedelic practice, which after 3 medium dose sessions, I ended up developing a facility for working with high doses of LSD and developing a protocol following Stan Grof's protocol. And you know the drill, right? Total isolation. This is not group therapy, group work. Total isolation, private, protected, with a sitter, carefully curated playlist, all-day engagement, start to finish, long day. And I chose to work with 500 to 600 micrograms of LSD. And I don't recommend that protocol. Truly. Knowing what I know now at the end of that journey, I would do it differently. If I were starting over again, I would work with lower doses. I would balance periodically, maybe working with high doses of LSD with maybe intermediate sessions of psilocybin or ayahuasca. And I have experience with all those psychedelics that I mentioned, but my primary work has been with LSD. So maybe it's appropriate to speak to that on Bicycle Day, which we honor here. I chose to work in a Stan Grof kind of paradigm protocol, always in isolation, and take these massive doses of psychedelics. I was doing it about on average 5 times a year when I stepped back and looked at it all. And it ended up lasting 20 years. I worked for 4 years, I stopped for 6 years, and then I resumed again for a very intense 10 years. And over that 20-year period, which was between when I was 30 and when I was 50 years old. So I was kind of just started my Saturn return at 29-30. My whole second Saturn cycle was all under my psychedelic work. And then I stopped when I was 50 years old. And I didn't publish LSD and the Mind of the Universe for another 20 years. For a couple of reasons. One is, if I published that book as an academic, I probably would have been fired. Because the good people of Ohio, where I was teaching, don't like their university professors doing massive doses of LSD on the weekend. So I had to all my work was secret. None of my students ever knew what I was doing. My faculty, my close friends on the campus knew what I was doing, but they didn't really know. They didn't understand it. We didn't go into those conversations. It would usually start, I remember I did some psychedelics back in the day. Yeah, good. Good for you. Yeah. But when you're doing 500 and 600 micrograms amplified by the intensification of the most powerful music that I could pull down from the world stage of music and just drive it completely hard, you just shatter your mind. You shatter consciousness. You just blow it all apart, which is a dangerous undertaking. Unless you're really prepared and you really have your seatbelt fastened tight and you have a strong support system and good clinical grounding and you have a pretty solid sense of self, it's not wise to blow yourself apart that often. But I found I had a capacity, and astrologically it's in my chart, I have a capacity to get open, spacious, Neptune, opening up into deep states, and then I congeal easily. I congeal well. So the opening and the expanding, I could manage. And then I found over the first few years that I had a capacity to navigate this domain, and I developed an interest in working this hard, because what interested me was not the clinical applications. It wasn't the creative applications. What interested me was the capacity of LSD to take me into states where I could truly enter into the communion with the intelligence of the universe, and then that intelligence would teach me. Just like we all have that experience, right? You open up, you go deep, you open into this larger field. You clean up your housework, you got to clean up this and clean up that. But when you're clean, when you get out and you take in this larger, it speaks to you. It teaches you. I've often wished that I had advanced degrees in quantum physics and astronomy, quantum astronomy, because if I had, I would have been able to understand so much more of what it was teaching to me. But my background was in philosophy and religious studies, so it took me into those areas that I was most interested in, which is to understand the paradoxes of the human condition. Why is it so hard here? Why is human existence so hard? Why is there so much suffering? Why are we so estranged from our deepest connection to the universe? Where is reincarnation, since I took that into my psychedelic, where is reincarnation taking humanity? Where are we going? Because reincarnation lifts time off of our restricted, time ceases to be a restriction. Once you understand that we're reincarnating, there's no place to go after you leave here, you come back. You leave here, you come back. And you begin to open up a time horizon, which is beginning to understand perhaps the time horizon that the divine thinks in. Because the divine does not think in small-term projects, and the divine does not think in personal projects itself. It thinks in large projects, in species projects, in planetary projects. It thinks in galactic-sized projects. So the challenge becomes, how do we let ourselves begin to think, experience in galactic-size projects? And the first is to unlock the barrier of linear time, to let yourself go beyond the confines of this particular moment, as magnificent as it is, as beautiful as it is. And this, of course, is where the divine lives, is in the present moment. So a lot of spiritual practices focus on deepening experience of the present. But in psychedelic work, there is a potential to transcend the limits of the present. And when you step outside of linear time and enter into what I call deep time, that there are many dimensions of time in the universe, there are many levels of time, there are many different modalities in which the universe experiences itself through the medium of time. And it will take you into these deep, vast expanses where you can experience 100,000 years in the course of an hour. You can experience an acceleration of time that takes you beyond your personal story into humanity's story, beyond your personal growth into humanity's growth, into the larger evolution that the divine intent is working to seed and nourish and bring forward in the human community. Where are we going as a collective? Sri Aurobindo, the great Hindu sage, Oxford-educated Hindu sage, I always think that's interesting. That's a story. He had said, humanity is a transitional species. We're not stable. We're transitioning from what we were before, Homo sapiens, to what's coming yet. Everything's in motion. Galaxies are in motion. Earth systems are in motion. Humanity is in motion. Where are we going? What's it going to look like? I have to watch my time here. I want to inject a cautionary note. I'm so happy that we're really spending a lot of time, we're doing a lot of writing, and books are being authored on integration, the importance of integration. Because breaking out, now we have these powerful chemicals, we can break out of our time-space suit increasingly easily, but to do it in a way which is valuable, to do it the way which we can bring back something that we can keep, that's actually a harder part of the work, isn't it? To bring it in, first to remember it, because we can go so deep, we can't remember what we experienced. You have to train yourself to remember the deep experiences. If you go into the deep waters of the ocean, if you go far beyond personal identity, even far beyond human identity, into archetypal reality, into causal levels of reality, and into what I call the diamond luminosity reality, or what Buddhism calls Dharmakaya, the clear light of absolute reality. You go deep into that, you come back, it's hard to remember what your experience was. You have to train yourself to remember those experiences. The first step of integration is to remember. But my experience was that if you go back systematically in a clearly defined, therapeutic context, the first time you touch a new level of reality, I would not always be able to bring it all back. But if I went back again and again and again to that level of reality, I would begin to be able to see it more, understand more. There were fewer gaps in my session notes. It became clearer. I learned how to bring it back. And I found that this pattern repeated itself every time when I would break into a yet another deeper level of reality. First, there would be the kind of chaos and the uncertainty, but then with repetition, I could hold on to more of it. I would bring it back. I would bring it in. The second reason I took so long to write Diamonds from Heaven is not just because I was afraid of losing my job. And I like teaching. I like my job. I like being with students. The second reason is it took a long time. It takes a long time to digest and understand what our experiences are. Because a long history of psychedelic experiences, a long journey of psychedelic work, is very different than just having one or two or three interesting sessions on a Saturday afternoon. And I think some of our expectations of psychedelics have been shaped by a literary tradition around it, which is based upon very few psychedelic experiences. Aldous Huxley wrote his wonderful book, The Doors of Perception, after only one experience. And he wrote a beautiful book on one experience. When Houston Smith, the great don of religious studies, wrote his book, Cleansing the Doors of Perception, where he collected all of his essays on psychedelics, he had taken LSD only 6 times. He stopped then, he said, because the bummers seemed to increase and it wasn't as useful to him. And to me, that's when it starts to get interesting. When the bummers increase, that means there's some deep purification taking place, something's coming forward that's going to be hard for you to deal with. That's when it gets interesting. Or Michael Pollan, when he wrote his very important book on very important contribution to the psychedelic community, he had only taken psychedelics a handful of times. And this tends to create a set of expectations, and I think a very short-sighted set of expectations about what can happen in a psychedelic journey, in a psychedelic regimen. But if you go through a long journey, at least in my experience, it's not just you're always starting from the same spot and getting to the same level and having experiences at that level. To me, one goes through a series of death and rebirth processes, and the death and rebirth is a cycle as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the universe, as deep as one, your medicine has the capacity to carry you. Not all medicines have the same capacity to carry you as deeply. Okay, that's fine. Your capacity to withstand the chaos that's inherent in deep psychedelic exploration, and the tightness of your protocol, whether your protocol is really designed to holding you in a very carefully contained container, a kiva, to support you while you go deep in and then come back out, integrate, and then internalize. When I was at the end of my journey and working up my notes in order to write the book, I identified 5 basic levels at which I had worked over the course of time. The first is personal mind, the level of personal mind, psychodynamic territory. The second is the level of collective mind, the collective psyche, Carl Jung's territory, but more than Carl Jung's territory. Third level, archetypal mind, which is, in my context, in that Platonic sense of archetypes, not the Jungian sense of archetypes, but the Platonic sense of archetypes, is a domain of reality that lies beyond human species, beyond the species mind. In a way, just as in the personal level, your egoic mind has to fall away for you to open up into the deeper, richer experience. In the collective mind, to get into archetypal reality, the entire collective mind of humanity has to fall away from you. You literally lose all of your human roots. You lose all of the background, subtle textures of human consciousness, all the assumptions of human history, the assumptions of human cognition drop away. And you enter into a reality of archetypes, into the reality of the living beings who are responsible for creating space and time, who are responsible for creating some of the 4 fundamental core themes of space and time. But beyond archetypal reality, more cycles of death and rebirth entering into causal reality, where the signature feature of causal reality is permeating oneness, total oneness. Oneness has so many permutations, so many iterations, but in deep causal reality, the experiencing of life free of all dualities, radical transparency, radical selflessness, no self here, no self there, no self anywhere in nature. The entire world, as Plotinus says, lives and breathes as one. Us, ants, archetypes, all of us, living and breathing as one, to sink into that oneness, to the intelligence, which is the intelligence underneath it all, the intelligence that is shaping us, driving us, teaching us, expanding us, holding us accountable in our rigorous learning that time and space does, and taking us somewhere deeper, somewhere richer, somewhere more satisfying. And then beyond causal level reality, for me, the last 5 years of my work were spent exploring what I came to call the diamond luminosity, more death and rebirth, entering into states of luminous clarity, hyper clear beyond imagination. I began to understand better what the Buddhists meant when they say, touching it once undoes thousands of years of karma, because the hyper clarity is just, once I touched that, I wasn't interested in anything else that I had been exploring. I'd been 15 years exploring all these other levels I talked about, but that reality is so profound and so rich. It's the only thing I was interested in, was getting back to that reality. And I got to that reality in the last 5 years of my work and 26 sessions, which is an entire third of my journey. I got to that reality only four times. 4 times out of 26 sessions. A lot of work being done in those 26 sessions and other things, but only touching that reality 4 times. And they are, for me, the true diamonds from heaven, subtitle of the book. Caution. You can go deeper in the universe than is wise for you to go. You can have too much God. That seems like an oxymoron, right? Because it's better to have more of God. But at least in this method, which gives us temporary access and then brings us back, temporary access and bring us back, I think, at least it's been my experience, and even though I paid a lot of attention to integration all the way through, physical integration, subtle energy integration, emotional integration, social integration, even though I had taken all those precautions, I found in the end that I had gone so deep into transcendence, I had gone so deep into the subtle, luminous body of the divine, that I lost my interest in living inside time and space. Time and space just began to feel kind of like paper mache. When you know that this reality is not as real as that reality. That is more real than this reality. I didn't lose my bearings. I was doing my job, taking care of my family, and doing all the stuff that I ordinarily do. But I found that I was just, in my heart, I was waiting to die so I could go back. Because I reached a point in my work where I knew I had to stop for reasons I talk about in the book. 73 sessions. If you're not cooked by 73 sessions, forget it. 74 is not going to give it to you. You know? I was cooked. I was overcooked. I was waiting to die. I knew that I would not do any more deep work. And to go deep, it takes years and years. It's like training an Olympic athlete. You don't run out and it takes years to develop the momentum, the psychic momentum, to be able to get back into this territory. I could not get back into the territory today, now that I've stopped this work 20 plus years. I could not get back into the territory I was exploring at the end, no matter how heavy a dose of LSD I took today. It takes time to be able to develop the momentum to move there. So I reached a point where I knew I had to stop. It was time to stop. And I knew I would not get back into this reality until I died. And this is one of the differences maybe between using psychedelics for spiritual awakening, where the goal is to consume all one's karmic fixations and all one's blocks until one can enter into the transparent condition and enter into the deep communion with the eternal dimension of existence as it courses through this present moment right here. A noble goal, and the spiritual masters have always been my guides on my journey. This is something different. To enter into deep time where you're dealing with the evolutionary story of humanity, so deep into the light, which is the source from which the Big Bang exploded. When I stopped my sessions, after I stopped my sessions, it took me about 10 years to sort of reground myself in being committed to living out the rest of my life inside time and space. And when I say that, I don't mean that I was totally functional in the world. I was doing all the things I would have to do. But in terms of recommitting myself to living in the immanent divine, instead of immersing myself in the transcendent divine, it took me 10 years to kind of recommit myself until I could be comfortable living in the immanent divine. And that's why a word of caution. You can't go too deep. You can't go deeper than is good for you. You can go deeper than is good for your family, the people who depend on you. Where is reincarnation taking us? I've talked about this sort of large trajectory. Where is reincarnation taking us? There was a point in my sessions where, and again, I haven't had, I've always envious of people who have teachers, lots of teachers. I mean, I think that's great. That's really important. I don't have lots of teachers. I've only had one teacher, and that's the universe. That's the consciousness of the universe itself. That's been my only teacher. And it's been a rigorous teacher. I mean, beat me up, break me down, crush me, love me, bring me back to life multiple times. Only one teacher. And so there was this one particular day where the teacher seemed to be interested in showing me where reincarnation was taking us. And I experienced all of my former lives beginning to come back into me fast and furious. I mean, I'd done past life therapy, had a sense of my history, but this was larger. They were all coming back very quickly, and it was like wrapping kite string around a kite spool. These lives were coming back, and eventually they reached a time where they fused. They seemed to fuse into one, and with that fusion, there was an explosion of energy that just exploded inside my chest, and it was my first deep contact with diamond light. And I call this, I was catapulted into a state of consciousness where I was an individual. It wasn't like losing all boundaries and entering into oneness. I was an individual, but I was an individual beyond any frame of reference I'd ever known before. And I came to understand that this is where reincarnation is taking all of us, every one of us. We reincarnate, we die, we come back. We die, we get big into the soul, we come back into our incarnate life. We die, we get big into the soul, we come back. And if we keep this up, if we keep this rhythm up of expansion, contraction, and keep it up hundreds of thousands of years, we keep it up, expanding, contracting, dying, being born, dying and being born, sooner or later, doesn't it make sense? Sooner or later that the entire totality of our lives, which we meet when we die, when we return to our total soul, that totality of integrated historical experience would incarnate eventually inside time and space. And that's what's happening, I think, with the birth of the diamond soul. We are giving birth to the next form of human consciousness. And the next form of human consciousness is a human being whose mind is the repository and the integrated into a singularity of all the experiences he or she, they have ever had in all of their lives. And now they look at the world and they know they're not this. They know they're not a 100-year-old being. They know that their relationships are steeped in age and steeped in time. They know that their life projects are steeped in thousands of years of practice, not 100 years. I don't think we can continue to run this planet on the basis of egoic consciousness. The egoic consciousness, and I think ego is a beautiful thing. I'm not going to badmouth ego. Individual consciousness is a magnificent, beautiful, potentiating, empowering thing. But left to its own devices, it also tends to be cut off from each other, cut off from the earth. We've created a civilization based upon the psychological limitations and assets of egoic consciousness. And right now, this civilization is generating problems of a magnitude which I don't think can be solved operating out of egoic consciousness. We literally can no longer afford the luxury of being children on this planet. We have to grow up. And growing up, I think, means owning ourselves, owning our histories, owning our former lives, owning the destiny that's carrying us through time, arching through time, taking us into not our plan for the human future, but I call it the divine. I'm not always comfortable with that word because, it's been sullied by our world's religions. But the creative intelligence of the universe, the creative intelligence that's taking us into billions and billions and billions of years more, still to come, which we have not seen. Personally, I think we are entering a time of history of profound challenges. The challenges we're facing are not simply political and social challenges, though they're there. They're not simply ecological challenges, though that's going to be becoming more and more and more and more powerful as we move forward deeper into the 21st century. At core, all of these challenges, I think, are symptoms of a challenge of consciousness. We literally do not know who we are. We don't know what we are. All we have to do is look at the White House to see that we do not know who we are. We do not know what we are. And we cannot afford to run on this incomplete knowledge any longer. The universe is taking us into a profound death and rebirth process, which in many ways will be very similar to the death and rebirth process that we have seen mystics go through when they enter the dark night of the soul, a time of intense purification, until their natural, spontaneous spiritual nature shines free. just as happens in psychedelic sessions. When we go through those very dark sessions, which are just turgid and they're painful and they're difficult, but you embrace it and you just take it down to the bottom until you go through the death process, and then you're spun into clarity, kindness, compassion, understanding, wisdom. I think the entire planet is going into a death rebirth process. And that's why ever since my book, Dark Night, Early Dawn, I talk about the dark night of our collective soul, the purification of our collective psyche, purification of our collective institutions. We are going into a period which, just as in a psychedelic session, we lose control. We're losing control of all the things we thought we could assume about culture and civilization. We're losing control of the ordinary assumptions of life. We're going to be facing challenges, unprecedented. The oceans are rising. You know the scenarios. I don't have to repeat them. Just coming at us very fast. Cities going underwater. Mass migrations, eco-migrants. We're entering into the time of the great undoing. Just as in a psychedelic session or on a meditation cushion, you have to face the deepest fears, the deepest anger, the deepest terrors, in order to melt into the truer condition, into the lasting condition, into the true peace that satisfies the inner longing. Our culture is going through that. I have no idea how it's going to do it, but in my sessions I have seen it. I've experienced it in deep time, a period of profound trauma, a profound uncertainty, and a deep unraveling of the human community. And yet, my experience at least is that we make it through this. We come through it, we don't survive it, we die. And we come through it changed, transformed, that in this international crisis, we go through a process, an experience that just breaks open the human heart. And oneness is born in the human family, concentrated in some individuals, subtly pervasive for the collective as a whole. The theme of oneness, the theme of compassion, the theme that makes all our intelligence and all our discoveries safe. We will stop using them for war. We will stop using them for destruction. We will start using all of our talents to serve the common good. I think the global crisis that we're going into is synergistically coupled to the psycho-spiritual process that we are going through in the birth of the diamond soul. And as we experience our perpetual transformation taking place in our psychedelic sessions. That is, the world is trying to become one. We cannot solve our problems within the world of the nation states. Just as the world is trying to become one, the soul is trying to become one. There's an inner wholeness here. We are trying to become our deepest self, our deep soul self, just as the world is trying to become one. And there's a synergistic coupling that I think that as the world transitions into and through this crisis, the world is composed of souls. And souls are not 100-year-old things. Souls are 100,000-year-old things. And that means that the humanity that's going into this crisis is a humanity of 100,000-year-old beings. And personally, I'd rather go into a global crisis with 100,000-year-old beings than I would with 100-year-old beings, because we have the knowledge, we have all the knowledge, we have the capacity, it's within us. This is one of the most exciting centuries you could possibly be alive in, I think. The changes by the end of the 21st century and beyond, we will be living in a very different world than the world we're living in now. I don't know how long it will take us to navigate this. I think at least 3 generations, maybe more. This is not something which is going to be accomplished quickly and easily. And I'd like to end by reminding ourselves of the power of psychedelics to profoundly impact one of the scariest things that human beings go through in this life is dying. My wife of 25 years, Christina, died a month ago, 6 weeks ago. She had cancer. She, like me, was a psychonaut. She had extensive experience of spiritual reality, and this completely changed her death and my experience of her death. She was not afraid of dying. She knew where she was going. She had had firsthand experience where she was going. And that changes death from a sort of crushing experience of defeat or fear and uncertainty into a celebration of a life well lived, a life that was brought to rich fruition, conclusion, and therefore knowing that she was returning home into the arms of the beloved. She was returning home to the great mother which had given birth to her. There's no fear here. There's joy and celebration. And this is the way it's supposed to be. This is what the Center for Conscious Living and Dying is helping bring about in the community here. This is what death really is. Death is the celebration. Death, you should mourn children who are being born. They're beginning the hard work. Death, you're graduating. You're going back home, right? Psychedelics. Christina had a lot of psychedelic experience. Psychedelics were not part of her active dying process. It was already done beforehand. She took what she had learned into her dying and therefore engaged death differently than other people might engage death. If there were one thing I wish I could take out of all the psychedelic work I'd done for all those years, if there were one thing I wish I could just reach into my heart and give it to people, it would be, please, lose your fear of death. If you're afraid of dying, you have your cosmology all upside down. Death is returning to the world of plenty, the world of fullness, the world of light, the world of superintelligence, the world of understanding, the world of infinite compassion. Being born in Asheville, maybe not so much, right? We have to work hard here. We have to work hard. There, we receive the rewards of the work that we've done. What a revolution. 82 years since that bicycle ride. And we're just getting started. Ehren said, we're just getting started. We are just in baby steps. If we look forward to 15 years, if we look forward to 50 years, if we look forward to 100 years, just imagine, if we handle this transition well, if we harness the energy of psychedelics conscientiously, responsibly, wisely, then we can accelerate this generational change that we're trying, I think nature and the divine intelligence is trying to bring about in the human family. And we are all part of this revolutionary transition. Simply by being here, we are acknowledging that we are part of this revolutionary transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Everybody, please, Dr. Christopher Bache. Just taking a moment to just honor this man's profound courage. You know, as I shared before, the mental health, the healing dynamic is the on-road to our reintegration of psychedelics into our culture, into our community, and very much an important on-road for many reasons. But as he has shared, the exploration into consciousness, into our connection, to our spirituality, into our cosmology, there is a frontier there, a profound frontier that maybe many of the ancients might have been aware of as well, that we are re-stepping into. So let's carry that in our hearts, as we are now expressions of this possibility. We are active members in this great learning that has been tasked to us. How do we take these medicines and grow and learn beyond the self into a collective, into a holistic being?
Thank you for watching, and please remember to like this video and to subscribe to our channel.
For more information or to make a donation towards our cause, please visit our website.